Yes, sir.
Oh, you can hear me. Okay, and should I switch on my? Just a minute. Okay, am I visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. So can we start in? Tell me when to start. Or we can start in 5 minutes or whatever.
Okay, we'll start sharp on 6 p.m.
Okay, okay, okay. So what should will you introduce? Not that I need. I am asking you to introduce me, but what is the procedure? That you introduce me first, or I start speaking right? Just I start speaking. Which one?
Okay, so first we will introduce you, and then you will start your presentation.
Okay, okay, okay. Fine, 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 fine. No problem.
And after that, we'll follow a question answer session. And those
Fine.
who want to ask question, they will post it in the comment box.
Okay, 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 okay. ठीक है. So it's now 5:59. Okay. किताब दे दो मेरे को. There are some things there also you can use.
Ayush, do you start recording?
Yes, yes, started.
Okay. Okay. So I think we're live now. Um, so okay. So hello and good evening, everybody. Voices from the Periphery welcomes you at the seventh online lecture. And today we are really honored to have with us Professor Sabyasachi Dasgupta, sir. Professor Dasgupta teaches history at the Department of History in Visva-Bharati University, and he specializes in Indian military history. And today he will talk on remembering the revolt of 1857. Professor Das, as I already have told, he specializes on the Indian military history, and some of his works are In Defense of Honor and Justice, Sepoy Rebellion in the 19th century, published from Primus, New Delhi, and some of his articles are Durgadas and Sitaram, Tales of Loyalty, the rebel army in 1857 at the vanguard of the war and in war of independence, or a tyranny of in arms, published in Economic and Political Weekly, and Mutiny and Margins, the Indian Uprising of 1857, presented at University of Edinburgh, 2007. He has been awarded Charles Wallace Visiting Fellowship in 2012 to the Humanities and Center for South Asian Studies in University of Edinburgh. So, thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation. And all of the members of this group are students. So, we are really eager and excited to hear from you about the various aspects of the rebellion of 1857. So, over to you, sir.
Thank you. Firstly, I would like to say that I've grown up in the Northeast. I have been a student of St. Edmund's College. So obviously I would have accepted, and the Northeast has a special place in my heart. I would like to say one thing before starting, that while I know that you have been doing very good work and a lot of people have spoken here, at least 6 people before me, why do you call yourself Voices from the Periphery? I mean, who defines periphery and core? I mean, that is the issue. So you could say also you are Voices from the Northeast. What is the need for defining yourselves? I mean, just my suggestion. And as far as today's talk is concerned, the remembering the revolt of 1857, as far as this talk is concerned, for me, in today's talk, the periphery are the areas where outside the epicenter of the revolt. That is, if you talk about the revolt of 1857, the epicenter would be today's large parts of today's Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Jharkhand, Central Asia, Madhya Pradesh, Delhi, Haryana. So for me, the other areas, be it Maharashtra, be it Gujarat, be it Bengal, be it northeastern India, are the periphery, which is not to say that nothing happened there. A lot of things happened there, but we can, recent research has shown that even the areas where we thought that nothing has happened, things were happening, but maybe nevertheless not with the same intensity as were things happening in the epicenter of the revolt. Now the point is, as my today's talk is remembering the revolt of 1857, the 1857, as you all know, is often considered as the first war of independence. It's one of the hackneyed terms which is used, but it is used very frequently, and by into today's India, it is often considered as the first war of independence. And the point is, why was, let's say, the Santal Rebellion, or let's say the Vellore Mutiny of 1806 not considered the first war of independence? Because as some of you might be knowing, the Vellore Mutiny of 1806 took place obviously in Vellore, in the Madras army. It was a big rebellion, and it had its origins because of the discontent among soldiers over an order which said that from now on soldiers cannot wear whiskers or display caste marks on parade. And also a new headgear was issued, which the soldiers thought looked like resembled the headgears of the army drummers, whom they considered as half caste. So I'm not going into much details of the Vellore Mutiny, but a very big mutiny broke out in Vellore on the 10th of July 1806, which included 2,500 soldiers. And mutiny also almost spread to other areas in southern India, in the sense that there was trouble in Hyderabad, Palamkatta, Walajhar. But unlike 1857, these uprisings or breakouts were nipped in the bud. So it is obvious that The Vellore mutiny might not have been an isolated instance. There might have been some kind of a plan, some kind of a planned outbreak, but you could say that the Vellore mutiny missed the bus, or the mutiny in the South India missed the bus, in the sense that if the outbreaks had not been nipped in the bud in Vellore and in other places, we could have seen a much bigger mutiny 50 years before 1857, and possibly one could have called it the first war of independence. But this is what could have happened, but it did not happen. And there were some parallels with 1857. Like 1857, there were certain rumors before the Vellore mutiny outbreak of 1806. There were rumors that the atta was mixed with the cow and pig bones, and the Vellore mutiny in Madras army, they were consisted of so-called middle and lower caste Hindus and a sizable number of Muslims. So obviously these rumors affected everybody. And also there were these puppet shows. Fakirs were going around organizing puppet shows where they were seeing that the soldiers and the common people are killing the white soldiers or the British soldiers. So the point is that there was some kind of a planning. We do not know whether there was civilian support, because there was not enough time maybe for the civilians to display their support, because let's say the rebellion broke out on 10th of July in Vellore. By 11th of July afternoon, the rebellion had been quelled, and it was the same in other places in southern India. So it could have been the first war of independence. It was a major mutiny, but I would say it missed the bus. Southall rebellion of 1856, of course, was a very, very courageous rebellion. It spread over 12,000 kilometers, and the Southalls, despite their inferiority as far as weaponry was concerned, fought fantastically, and even the British were full of admiration for them. But ultimately, obviously, it was a rebellion which was doomed to lose. So, though it was spread over 10,000 or 12,000 kilometers, it ultimately failed. Now, the revolt of 1857, when we come, the revolt of 1857, in many senses, was, as Irfan Habib calls it, the greatest anti-colonial revolt in the 19th century against the British colonial power anywhere in the world. It may not have included certain areas of the subcontinent, or maybe it did not happen with the same intensity in every part of the subcontinent, but nevertheless, it was by all means the greatest mutiny, in the greatest anti-colonial revolt in 19th century. In 19th century, you could say in the 19th century in the world, anywhere in the world. And for the first 4 or 5 months, the British rule seriously looked shaky. In a large parts of northern India, central India, and in eastern India, British rule had been wiped out, and the issue was touch and go for a long time. And it was a mutiny which was very, very brutal, in the sense that it was almost as if both sides were locked in a mortal combat. No side was willing to give any quarter. Atrocities were committed by both sides, and I don't believe in the maxim that eye for eye, tooth for a tooth. One atrocity justifies another atrocities. Atrocities are atrocities. There is no action-reaction formula. So anyway, what I wanted to say is that it was a brutal conflict involving a lot of civilian deaths and lot of atrocities and brutality on both sides. Now, so in a sense, 1857 is simply the biggest anti-colonial rebellion, bigger than the Vellore mutiny or the Southern rebellion or other rebellions. Now, when it comes to remembering, so how do we remember the revolt of 1857? Now, firstly, today we are operating in a world where we consider it as the first war of independence. My basic argument is that it took time for especially the elite to consider 1857 as the first war of independence. If we talk of remembering or commemorating, firstly we could talk of those families who were directly affected by 1857, as in members of the family had died, or these families had suffered fearful retribution from the British because of their role in 1857. So how did these families remember? Now the point is that while as far as the memory of these families are concerned, first is that one generation remembers 1857 first hand, as in they have directly experienced 1857, and have suffered heavy consequences for their role in 1857. Then what happens is that for me that the memories are passed on from generation to generation, and when memories are passed on from generation to generation, obviously the nature of the memory changes, and often the memory becomes a mixture of fact and fiction, and also it depends on what happens to those families in the subsequent generations, because as we know, a lot of families were ruined as far as 1857 are concerned. But if let's say, so obviously when they're going from passing from memory generation to generation, their memory is changing, and if these families, let's say, recover and in the subsequent generations, then trauma could transform itself into nostalgia that we had performed, that we had a role in 1857. But if those families do not recover, then it still could be nostalgia, but it would be a trauma of the mutiny would be a very important component in their memory. Now, as far as collective consciousness is concerned, first of all, collective memory is concerned. Firstly, collective memory is a very, very vague term or a problematic term. What is collective memory, or is there some kind of a homogeneous collective memory? Now, how do we define collective memory? One way of defining collective memory is that, let us say, as a huge incident happens, let it be 1857, let it be partition. I know one of your faculty, Vinayak Datta, works on partition. A huge event occurs, so people have a certain memory of it, collective memory. So how do we define what is the collective memory of partition, or how do we define what is the collective memory of 1857? So one way of defining is it, notional way of defining is that there is a dialogue between the singular memory of people and the plural, as in there are people who have a singular memory, various people who are engaged in a dialogue with themselves, and within that dialogue there is a consensus, and that consensus you could call is the collective memory. Means what I am trying to say is that, let's say there are singular memories of a very traumatic event, and then that singular interacts with the plural, as in the singular. Let's say there are 10 people, just to say example. So they are interacting among themselves and then and telling their own memories, and then there's certain consensus, and that consensus is the collective memory. But this is problematic according to me, because collective memory is rarely homogeneous. It is mediated by caste, it is mediated by class, it is mediated by gender. So there are a lot of factors. So there is a problem. But nevertheless, if we try to go into what was the collective memory of 1857, I would first of all make two distinctions. Firstly, I would say that the revolt and its commemoration, or it acquiring a cult status, it acquired first among the masses in certain parts of India, in the parts where the revolt was at its maximum or had the most intensity, that is UP, Bihar and Jharkhand. In many of these areas, even if you still today go, you will find these local shrines. There is a shrine in Bihar called Ranjit Baba, apparently a so-called low-caste Pasi who led the rebellion in that area. So in that area, even if today a newlywed couple, before they start their life, they have to go and pray at the shrine of Ranjit Baba. And apparently there was somebody called Ranjit Pasi in the historical records who led the rebellion in those areas. So there is a commemoration in that respect. And also, as Badri Narayan showed in his article on Dalit participation in 1857, something to which I will come back, that many Dalit villages in Uttar Pradesh have their own samadhis and own commemorative stones as far as 1857 is concerned. So, and even the interesting fact is that while even in areas where apparently nothing happened during the rebellion, let's say Bengal, where due to various reasons nothing happened, because one important reason being that the Bengali middle class, which was in love with the modernity espoused by the British, or the modernity represented by the British, thought that if they participate in the rebellion, then the Sipahis and the feudal Nawabs and the Rajas, who were at the helm of the rebellion, they would take us backwards, because their vision was not progressive, their vision was reactionary. Whereas if the British stayed on in India, then the Indians would have a trust with modernity, and in course of time the British would hand us on a platter all democratic rights, like right to freedom, right to press, as they did in England. And we would, in course of time, become a modern nation. So the British needs to stay for some time. So apparently there was no support for the British for the rebellion in Bengal in 1857. But strangely, the first iconic painting of Rani Lakshmibai was done by Kalighat pot painters sometime in the 19th century. The exact period is not known, but let's say it was done sometime in the 1870s. And this is significant because apparently Bengal showed no support. And also, to draw or to paint Rani Lakshmibai was not without peril, because post the British victory, the British atrocities were tremendous, and anybody they suspected of having a whiff of sympathy for the rebels was liable to be executed. And one thing must be said, that while the rebels were not guilt-free on this account, they committed a lot of atrocities. The British atrocities were 10 times more terrible. So the Kalighat painters are still drawing the iconic icon of Rani Lakshmibai. So what could have happened is that often what happens, that suppose the event happens in your neighborhood which you don't support, or you are indifferent to. When post facto that event becomes really big and you realize that something momentous has happened, you acquire support for it. You display support for it. So this is something which could have happened. Similar was the case in northeastern India, in today's Barak Valley, in the area around Karimganj, Silchar, Hailakandi. In that area, the Hindustani regiment station, these were not Hindustani regiment station, mind you, these were not local Biharis or local Purvayas or local UPIs. So this was a Hindustani regiment station there, which mutinied. And there was evidently no public support for those soldiers. They were caught, captured, executed, hanged. But in that area, some of you might be knowing, and Professor Sujit Kaur has done admirable work on this. There emerged songs regarding this revolt, Jongiyar Geet, as they say, the rebel songs. And these songs celebrated this revolt by the Hindustani regiment. And these songs are still you can still access these songs. These songs are still in existence, and it became a memory in those areas where nothing happened to. Apparently, there was no support for these rebels. People composed songs in honor of these rebels, and these are songs which have persisted even, let's say, 150, 160 years post the revolt. So again, here there might have been some kind of post facto support. Now. There was also the case, as you know, of Moniram Diwan, which today is, I think, the anniversary of Tirot Singh also, if I'm not mistaken. So Moniram Diwan, I need not introduce in detail to you people from the Northeast, but as you know, the Moniram Diwan was a Diwan in the, he was you could say, the Prime Minister or the Chief Minister of the Ahom King, and he is supposed to have organized a revolt in 1857, because Moniram Diwan, when the Ahom King was first post the Burmese war, as you know, that the British assumed the administration of Assam, the Ahom Kingdom in various aspects, and the Ahom Kingdom was first, and when Ahom Kingdom was ultimately pensioned off to the Jorhat, Moniram Diwan went every year to Bengal to appeal for the restoration of the Ahom King. So apparently, when he went in 1856 to Kolkata, he noticed that there was a huge discontent in the air. And apparently, he tried to organize through his Madhu Mukhtar, rebellion in Assam. He is supposed to have written certain letters to the king in Jorhat, exhorting, and other people in Assam, exhorting him to them to rebel the British and overthrow the British. And there was this Assamese Daroga who intercepted the letters, and on the basis of that, they moved against Moniram Diwan and captured him and hastily executed him. And they hastily executed him because Moniram Diwan was also, as you know, one of the earliest tea planters, and was Diwan in the Assam Tea Company. So they did not like his independence, they did not like his forthrightness. He had got into a lot of confrontations with the British on various aspects. So This was the chance to to proclaim him guilty and hang him. And they hanged him. Now, why I say this, apparently they played a role, because while there are those letters are there, they are not signed by Moniram Deva. So there is they always exist certain amount of ambiguity. Now, I will come back to the Moniram Diwan, because what happened was that while Moniram Diwan initially, when Moniram Diwan was hanged, the Assamese writers and Assamese intellectuals, Assamese common people, they sort of said that Moniram Diwan was not guilty. Okay, Moniram Diwan was not guilty. He was hanged because he loved the Assamese people, he loved the Assamese nation, and he was wrongly accused of conspiring to overthrow the British in 1857. The same writers, like let's say Benudhar Sharma, 20 years hence will now proclaim Moniram Diwan as this great hero who tried to organize the uprising against the British in 1857. There would be a certain airbrushing of Moniram Diwan's image, because Moniram Diwan, when the British first resumed administration in 1824, and some of the Assamese nobles led a rebellion against them. One of the notable names being Pioli Fukan. Pioli Fukan street, as in Guwahati, is a major street, and there were certain panchayats held where Moniram Diwan was one of the members who apparently signed the petition which condemned these Assamese nobles to death. So all these inconvenient facts were now airbrushed, and Moniram Diwan was now proclaimed as one of the great heroes who sort of innocent. He was wrongly accused of conspiring in 1857 because he loved the Assamese nation, and that's why they didn't like him. Now, why this change, I will come to later. But so what I wanted to say is that possibly 1857 acquired a halo or a cult image among the masses earlier than the elite. Now, when it comes to the elite took it, especially the new elite, the Bhadralok class, the so-called Bhadralok class, the middle class, upper middle class, everywhere, the colonial newly arisen bourgeois class, they took their time to warm up to 1857, and it was by no means that 1857 was considered as the War of Independence in the early phases. In the sense that if you read Nehru or if you read Gandhi, especially Nehru's Discovery of India, he admires the courage of the sepoys. Says that they are very brave, but at the same time, he says that they were very backward, they were very retrograde, and they had no vision. And if they had won, the era of the Nawabs and the Rajas would have come back. Okay, would have come back. Now, firstly, this is a debatable point, whether if the sepoys had won, whether the era of the Rajas and the Nawabs would have come back, because if you look at the mutiny or the revolt or the War of Independence, whatever you say, and if you look at the way they behaved with the sepoys and the Rajas and the Nawabs, they were very, very assertive. They were very, very assertive. Bahadur Shah Jafar had complained that to the British that the sepoys had even pulled his beard once when they were in an altercation. And even Nadir Shah apparently had not entered the Diwani Khas with shoes on, which the sepoys had entered. The sepoys were very vociferous in the disapproval of, let's say, in the British Qadar as the successor to Begum Hajatman in Lucknow, made open fun of him when he was being anointed the successor, saying that देखो देखो कैसे लड़की जैसा देखने में है. So they were very, very assertive, and they were very known. Whether this assertion would have continued in a peaceful situation, we don't know, because the sepoys were also very conscious that they were the most professionally trained soldiers in the rebel ranks. Means it was something ironical. They had rebelled against the company and the East India Company, but the professional training which the East India Company had given them made them the most valued soldiers, the most valued personnel in the rebel army. So, and also, while the sepoys were democratic in their own respect, in the sense that while they often got into skirmishes with the local populace, because sepoys had their own sense of power and entitlement, which again the company service had given them, that we are soldiers of the East India Company. They they conducted some kind of a democratic government from the Red Fort, where there was a committee of 10, where 6 were from the military, 4 were from the civilians. Every issue was deliberated upon. All the 10 members had different portfolios. Once a decision was taken, like what happens now, that the bill is sent to the Prime Minister, the President of India for signing. The bill would be sent to, or the decision would be sent to Bahadur Shah Jafar, and Bahadur Shah Jafar could refuse twice, but the third time he had to sign. And they called these proceedings the court. So in their own sphere, they were democratic, and this was the same procedure in elsewhere as far as Bareilly or Lucknow was concerned. So this contention of Nehru or contention of the other members of the Indian bourgeois, that if the Sepoys had won, they would have brought back the era of the Nawabs and the Rajas, is problematic, can be debatable. But anyway, these were certain reasons why they sort of did not warm up to the Indian War of India, the 1857 rebellion, and refused to initially consider it as a war of independence or as an epical moment. The first person to call it a war of independence was actually, it is often considered that Karl Marx considered it to the first war of Indian independence. Karl Marx's exact words were that it is a national revolt, national struggle, which means that it is much more than a military mutiny. But he did not call it a war of independence. In a subsequent edition, Moscow edition of Karl Marx's speech and writings on 1857, that edition, it was printed as Karl Marx called it the first war of independence. He actually called it a national revolt, which is almost the same thing as the war of independence. But if you were to be precise, he didn't use the exact terms war of independence. He called it a national revolt. The first Indian in 1909 to call it a war of independence was Vinayak Damodar Savarkar. Before that, Syed Ahmed Khan, as you all know, who was the assistant collector in Bijnor during the mutiny. He wrote an account of the mutiny where he called it a Bagawat, but he didn't call it a war of independence. And Syed Ahmed Khan had to face a lot of problems for his account, but he somehow managed to convince the British that while I have been critical of you, it is for your own good. I don't want to foment any trouble here. That is why I have sent all my copies of my autobiography to abroad, and I have written only one author's copy. So this is for your own good that I am pointing out these shortcomings on your side, so that the rebellion does not happen again. Then there is Durgadas account. Durgadas was this Bengali clerk in 1857 who sort of was posted in Bareilly at the time of the rebellion, and the rebellion, when rebellion broke out, he was imprisoned by the rebels, and they asked him to join the rebellion because Durgadas apparently knew lot of this languages. They asked him to join as some kind of ambassador, that where he would write letters to various foreign governments and all. Durgadas refused, so he was thrown into jail. He was kept under house arrest, and there is this he writes this riveting account where ultimately he escapes from house arrest, reaches Nainital through Ramgarh, and ultimately he takes part in the mutiny on the side of the British, and maybe he's one of the rare Bengalis who fought in 1857 for the British. So there is the Durgadas' account, but none of these accounts. And while this account is very, very interesting, and there is this lot of this dynamics between and mutual contempt between the Bengalis and the Biharis, where the Durgadas calls them Sattukhors and not capable of intellectual action, whereas the Biharis often ask Durgadas, the Purbaja soldiers, that how come you were, because Durgadas was very tall and strong, how come that you, despite you being a Bengali, you were so stout and tall. So all these notions are there. But the moot fact is that Durgadas and all do not describe it as a war of independence. And Durgadas definitely won't describe it as a war of independence because he's taking part on the side of the British and he is critical of the rebels. So coming back, the first person to describe it is Vinayak Damodar Savarkar. Veer Savarkar, very, very controversial man, as you know. And I need not elucidate on who Veer Savarkar is and why he's controversial. But his 1909 version is we I do not know Marathi, and possibly the Marathi version of his account is not available now. But even if you read the English version, it is a kind of written in a very racist style, a kind of style where if you read, you will be steered to do something, and he calls it emphatically the War of Independence, the first War of Independence, and he also considers that this was a war in which Bengal Hindus and Muslims fought together to uproot the British, which you might consider slightly strange given his subsequent actions and career. But in 1909, when he's writing the first war of Indian independence, he's very emphatic on the point that the Hindus and Muslims are fighting together here to uproot the British, and this was the first war of Indian independence. Okay. Also, now coming back to Moniram, we now see also that the early 20th century writings on Moniram, suddenly, as I mentioned before, they are talking about that Moniram was this great hero in 1857 who tried to organize uprising among the Assamese to uproot the British from Assam. Whereas the same authors that 20 years ago, as I had said that he was innocent, he was not involved in any uprising. They had merely framed him because he loved the Assamese nation, so they had framed him on false charges. So now, why this shift in emphasis? So my point here is that gradually this notion that this was the epical moment in our war of independence, in our anti-colonial struggle against the British, was taking roots, and now communities were thinking, or areas were thinking, that it would be good if we showed some kind of participation in this epical moment in our anti-colonial struggle against the British. So it would prove that in these crucial moments, epical moments, our community or our region was not lacking in initiative or in courage. Or we were second to none when it came to participation. So it would be good to show some kind of a participation. So the same authors who were talking about Moniram being framed wrongly, and being wrongly accused of fomenting a conspiracy during 1857, are now saying that he was this great hero who tried to organize something in 1857. This is my argument. I might be wrong, I might be right, but you are open to challenge me. Now, after that, there are a lot of accounts written on 1857, but I move now to post 1947, and I move to 1957, the 10th anniversary of India's War of Independence and the 100th anniversary of the War of Independence, where three major accounts came. One is the official account by S.N. Sen, Surendranath Sen, all of you might have heard of him. One is by R.C. Majumdar, who lost out to Surendranath Sen as far as writing the official account of the mutiny was concerned. And one is by the great communist academic P.C. Joshi, who wrote this edited volume on 1857. Now, coming to Surendranath Sen, what is intriguing is that what did you expect? That a nation which has newly emerged independent, it's a 10th anniversary, and now they are marking the 100th anniversary of the revolt. So the official account would be something which would glorify, in hallowed terms, this great rebellion, considered term is at the first war of Indian independence. But strangely, Surendranath Sen, while he accepts that it was more than a revolt, is very hesitant to call it a war of independence, except in parts of Awadh, the present-day UP, the Awadh region. Except in Awadh, he does not term it as the first war of Indian independence. He says that while it was more than a mutiny, and there was public support for it in certain areas, to call it a nationalist revolt or a war of independence in modern terms would be erroneous. This term would only apply to Awadh, where it could be called a national struggle against the British. So now, Nehru was the Prime Minister at the point of time, as you know, and Maulana Abul Kalam Azad was the Education Minister. They passed the book, they passed the project. Abul Kalam Azad writes a very interesting foreword, where he tries to invert the issue, where he tries to argue that, as we all know, that we have one with that, the rebellion was much of the leadership, apart from the sepoys, much of the leadership was consisted of the feudal elements, the rajas, the nawabs, the feudal landlords, and Abul Kalam Azad is clearly uncomfortable with this fact. So what he does is that in the forward, he tries to construct a version of the rebellion where he says that it was a spontaneous people's rebellion, where people spontaneously broke out in revolt against the British. Once the people broke out, the feudal lords and the nawabs joined the rebellion. So what is he trying to do is that he's trying to invert the issue. He's trying to argue, contest the argument that it was the feudal nawabs and the rajas who led the people against the British. On the contrary, the people broke out in rebellion, and once the rebellion broke out, the feudal lords and the nawabs joined the rebellion. So clearly, you can see that there is a certain discomfiture among, as far as Maulana Azad is concerned, Abul Kalam Azad is concerned, with the nature of the rebellion, with the feudal leadership of the rebellion, and he is not very comfortable in his trying to sort of recast the rebellion in a way he would be comfortable with. So my argument is that even in 1957, the elite, especially the new elite, the new middle class, upper middle class elite, who were now playing a dominant role or a prominent role in the affairs of the young Indian nation, they were still not comfortable with the notion that 1857 was the first war of independence, and they had certain kind of reservation among it. And that is why maybe our official account, which said that it was not the first war of independence, was allowed to pass. It could be also that they were very magnanimous people who believed in academic freedom, but it could also be that they still retained an amount of unease, and because they remained in unease, there was a rebellion. They did not mind an official account, which said that it was not the first war of independence. Briefly, I will tell the other two accounts. R.C. Majumdar also tried to contest the notion that it was a war of independence. He also tried to contest the notion that it was in rebellion where Hindus and Muslims fought together. He tried to show instances where Hindus and Muslims had rebelled or fought against each other. Now, I will not go much into that, but let me say that in most circumstances, overwhelmingly, the rebellion exhibited Hindu-Muslim cooperation. Instances of conflict between them were very rare, and even in certain cases, it was debatable whether it was a Hindu-Muslim conflict or conflict between, let's say, the soldiers of Firoz Shah Bahadur in Bareilly, who tried to extort money from the merchants. So, because in every city, what used to happen is that the rebels needed money to fight, so they used to go to the merchants, say that you have to donate money to us, and inevitably there used to be a fracas, there used to be trouble, there used to be very heated negotiations. In this case, the soldiers of Firoz Shah Bahadur happened to be Muslims, and the merchants of the Bareilly happened to be Hindus, and it soon fight, which was common in everywhere, it soon degenerated into a Hindu-Muslim conflict in Bareilly, which luckily did not spread much, but it did happen. So there were certain instances where Hindus and Muslims did quarrel. It's debatable whether all these instances were actually originally Hindu-Muslim conflicts, but in most cases they fought together. And anybody who says that they did not fight together, as far as I am concerned, has a malefied agenda. So this is what R.C. Majumdar says. P.C. Joshi. Now, P.C. Joshi's volume is important because this is a volume where a communist is writing, and there are two main articles in this volume. One is by P.C. Joshi himself. One is by a gentleman who writes under a pseudonym called Talmuj Khaldan. Now, both argue that this was a rebellion, people's rebellion, popular rebellion, where the feudal leadership took the lead role. They played the lead role. But they also say that where they differ is, P.C. Joshi says that they fought till the last, as far as the rebellion is concerned. The feudal lords, they did not compromise with the you could say the British. Whereas Talmud Khaldan says that once Canning came and offered pardon to the feudal class, many of the feudal lords compromised. But both argue that it was a popular rebellion led by the feudals. This differs slightly over the fact whether the feudals fought leaders compromised in the end or did not. And this entire volume also picks up on displays or shows, digs out songs, popular songs regarding 1857, popular plays regarding 1857. So this was a volume which now is trying to say that this was a popular rebellion. They are not exactly saying war of independence, that this was a popular people's rebellion, and they are digging out various aspects of the popular discontent against the British, which was just not reflected in fighting against them, but in composing plays, composing poems, composing songs against the British. So this now the Prissy Joshi element is very clearly laying out the element of popular participation in there. So this is then taken forward by in the 1960s by S.B. Chaudhary, Shashi Bhushan Chaudhary, who is now talking about his account is very important because he talks about that he shows that even in areas where supposedly nothing had happened, lot of incidents had happened. Gujarat, Assam, Maharashtra, in lot of areas. So his account is also important. So my then contention is that somewhere in the 1960s, 1970s, the notion started gaining ground, and gaining ground that 1857 was the first war of independence. The notion started gaining ground that it was an epical moment in our war against the anti-colonialists and the British, and gradually a situation was coming where if you do not show your participation against the British in 1857, you could be considered unpatriotic. And this was reflected in now just not writings, just not school question papers. It is also reflected in visually at the Saurabh Modi's Jhansi Ki Rani, which believe me is a much better movie than Manikarnika, which came out I think in 2019. Then in the 70s, late 70s, you have Junoon, which is basically a love story cast in the backdrop of 1857 by Sham Benegal. And if you see that movie, where Sham Benegal, there are these certain stark images of the rebels being hung from the trees, which hit you hard. So Junoon, Shatranj Ki Khiladi comes, which is not exactly on 1857, but at the backdrop of 1857, which is the annexation of Awadh by the British. And as you all know, possibly, the annexation of Awadh was one of the principal factors leading to 1857. Then comes Bharat Ek Khoj, which I don't know if any of you see it now, because in these days of Star TV and Zee TV and Doordarshan becoming what it is now, people forget that some of the finest serials shown on Indian TV have been shown by Doordarshan. And you see certain episodes of the Bharat Ek Khoj. I think it's the episode 41 and 42, which is on the mutiny of 1857. So what I basically, I'm not going to details of these movies. What I wanted to say is that by now 1857 is acquiring some kind of a cult status among the Indian intelligentsia, among the sections, among the Indian people, cutting across now class, possibly caste divide, or seemingly cutting across class, caste, gender divides or regional divides. 1857 is acquiring a halo of its own. Now, I won't go into much details on certain in the 70s, as you all know that this popular rebellion or this popular aspect of 1857 now acquired a tinge, as in authors like C. Ebbs, Eric Stokes, Rudrangshu Mukherjee started talking about when the popular became more concentrated on the peasant, as in the peasant participation in 1857. It is, in a way, you could say that they were concentrating on the popular aspect because most of the common people who participated in 1857 were the peasants. So they were concentrating on the peasant participation and on the nature of peasant participation in 1857. And then Gautam Bhadra's great essay on 4 rebels of 1857, where he tried to show very importantly that while we say that most of the leaders came from the feudal class, there were leaders who arose from the masses He takes Devi Raya, Shah Mal, Maulavi Ahmedullah, who arose from the masses and led rebellions in the respective areas. Of course, they were doomed to fail, but for let's say 1 month, 2 months, they were the masters in their own areas, and they fought a glorious war, which ultimately, of course, they were doomed to fail. So Gautam Buddha's article is very important because he tries to disprove or contest the notion that all feudal leaders came from the all leaders of the 1857 mutiny came from the feudal classes. He tries to argue that there were leaders who came from the masses too. But anyway, by that time, so now this 1857 is going a momentum of its own. People are writing on it, and the popular is now taking a twinge where people are talking about peasant participation. Gautam Bhadra is talking about the leaders arising from masses, and by the time 2007 comes, we see certain. How much time do I have? How much time do I have I spoken? How much time do I?
You can continue.
Okay. So anyway, so by the time 2007 comes, 2007 comes. My argument is that 2007 is the 150th year of the anniversary, and you could see that the umpteen seminars all over the country. I personally have gone to 12, but there might be even 200 seminars all over the country. And one could see one thing in the 2007 celebrations, the criticality which was there in the 1957 seminars, where people were questioning various aspects of mutiny, questioning whether it was a war of independence, was regrettably not exhibited. Everybody was out to prove it was uncritically adulatory of 1857. Everybody was out to celebrate 1857, and there were these ridiculous instances. I'll often not take names. There's Bengali historians who were desperate to prove that Bengalis took part in 1857. So they talked about this mysterious Amira in the West Bengal State Archives, where there's documents prove that the Bengalis took part in 1857. I don't know what has happened to the Mr. Amari and those documents, but I've seen nothing on that account written. So at times they Bengal presidency because and said that who said that nothing happened in Bengal, where a lot of things happened in Bengal presidency because Bihar, Eastern UP was very much in Bengal presidency during the mutiny. So there was this ridiculous attempts. I remember this talk paper by South Indian academic, must have retired by now. He was a professor then, 2007. I will not take his name. So paper was South India 1857, and then you could see that the entire paper was about the Vellore mutiny. Last India. So one could almost feel that these people were desperate. The various polygon revolts. One line there was great. We have to show something that as if we cannot prove that we participated in 1857, we will be considered unpatriotic. So this was this. So what I'm saying that this is an instance where now 1857 has acquired a hegemonic role, where as if there is pressure on people, pressure on communities, prove that they did something to 1857, lest they be considered unpatriotic. So these are it is now this epical moment you have to show. So that accounts for these ridiculous papers, because these people, people who wrote it were otherwise not ridiculous or you could say incapable academics, very good academics, but it's just the subconscious or the psychological pressure on them to prove that they have to show that something happened in 1857, because it has become such an important point in our War of Independence that they were desperate to show something. But of course, there were some very, very good papers, and I bring up two papers. Now I'll take the names because I have nothing but praise for them. So Badrinarayan and Charugupta, who took up some very important points, because Badrinarayan's paper especially, what he tried to argue was, because this is very important as far as remembrance is concerned, because while I argued initially that even if there is something called collective memory is mediated by caste, class, gender, or a lot of things. So there is no homogeneity. So Badrinarayan's paper basically, let me just take some water. Badrinarayan's paper basically tried to show that as Mayavati Banerjee was rising in the 1980s, Mayavati and Kanshiram and Dalit politics was rising in the 1980s, Dalits were becoming more and more assertive, and Dalit writers were now out to prove that Dalits had a great role in 1857. Dalits had a great role in nation building in general, and and in the anti-colonial struggle, and if they had a great role in the nation building and in the anti-colonial struggle, invariably they had a great role to play in 1857. And it is the upper caste historians who have till now suppressed the role of these Dalit heroes and heroines. So you have Uda Devi, you have Matang Bhangi, you have Jhalkari Bai. Some of you might be knowing Jhalkari Bai. Jhalkari Bai is this very trusted maid of Rani Jhansi who dressed as Rani Jhansi to fool the British while Rani Lakshmi Bai jumped from the fort and escaped to Gwalior. So all these Dalit heroes and heroines, they raped up and they said till now, upper caste historians have suppressed their role. And many of these writings, which were now trying to give a different version or to construct a different narrative with 1857, where the lower caste role or the so-called lower caste role was highlighted. These were not academic writings strictly, in the sense that these were not the writings we write, monographs we write with footnotes and endnotes. These were popular writings, but and often, as you know, as we academics will find out, often popular writings have what you call these days public history, in a sense. Popular writings have a bigger reach than the so-called academic writings. And it didn't matter to the Dalits. For a Dalit who read these writings, he believed in the stories. It didn't matter. If you go and ask him, "Bhaiya, footnoted nahi hai," so he might give you a very dark glance, because he or she is not bothered about whether they are footnoted or endnoted. He or she will say, "These are stories we have heard in our childhood. We know that this happened, and these are our heroes and heroines who have till now, the upper caste historians have suppressed their role. They are now getting their due." So as Dalit politics asserted itself in the 80s in northern India, and Dalit politics were going from strength to strength, these versions were also gaining strength, and Dalit writers were becoming more assertive when they were talking about the role of the Dalit heroes and heroines in 1857. And Charugupta's version, Charugupta talks about the significance, uh, especially the you could say the Dalit heroines, the Dalit women who took part in 1857. She tries to highlight their role in as far as 1857 was concerned, and she tries to argue that for Dalit women of today who face say how she first tries to show that how these Dalit women are represented. So if they're heroines, if they are very brave, they're invariably represented as masculine figures. As in they will not be petite or anything. They will be this tall, stout, so-called masculine figure they will have. So firstly, she was looking at the way the Dalit writers were themselves representing these Dalit heroines. So she was bringing in the angle of gender and gender discrimination or gender bias among the Dalits. And then she was also trying to say that these Dalit women of today, they take a lot of solace from these stories in their fight against the oppression of upper caste men and Dalit men among their own communities, Dalit men communities. So often they take solace from these writings when they say that if this woman could fight, then we can also fight. So these two partial articles, in my are very important because they complicate this entire story of collective memory and remembering 1857, and alert us to the fact that how they remember is not the same for the elite, for the masses, or even among the masses. It's not the same for an upper caste, and it's not the same for a Dalit. It might be the same for a let's say for a South Indian, or it might not be same for a North Indian. So this collective memory thing, even if it is being celebrated 1857, it would be celebrated in different forms depending on caste, class, region, and ethnicity. So let's say even if I say that 1857 and by now had acquired cult status, War of Independence, and everybody is out to prove their participation as a community or region there. The way they try to celebrate inclusion, the way they try to assert their role will be different. For somebody from the Hindi heartland who knows, it is obvious that they participated in that revolt, so it will be different the way they celebrate. Somebody from the marginal regions, periphery, as far as 1857 is concerned, they will try desperately to prove that we did something. Even within the Hindi heartland, a way upper caste celebrates 1857 and a way Dalit will celebrate is different. Dalit will say that the upper caste has actually suppressed the way the important role played by a Dalit. So this collective memory, remembering memory, is complicated, and to find the homogeneity is very, very difficult. Apart from that, there were certain other accounts where they, let's say, where they highlighted the role of the Adivasis, the role of the revolt, the way the revolt played out in Jharkhand, the importance of local factors and everything. Articles by Sabyasachi Dasgupta, Shashank, very interesting article on the Adivasis, where say the Adivasis who had just led a revolt in 1856, and memories of the revolt were very fresh in their minds. Once the British had gone, they were now out to defy every rule the British had made. So let's say the British had banned witch hunting, which you could say that is a good thing. Now they returned to do witch hunting with a vengeance, because the British had banned witch hunting. So witch hunting increased manifold in the areas following the British overthrow in the Adivasi areas. So for the Adivasis also, it's a case of remembering not the revolt per se, for remembering the rebellion and its failure, the subsequent imposition of British laws. Now that suddenly the British were gone, they were out to overturn these British laws with a vengeance, even if it meant manifold increasing certain horrendous things like witch hunting. So to conclude, I will not further leave you in agony. I have spoken enough. To conclude, I will say that the 1857 took its time to acquire the cult status among especially the elite. It took a long time for it to acquire this notion of a war of independence. But by 2007, it had acquired a cult status, and it was reflected in the way we celebrated 1857 in 2007. And often we were the papers and the lectures were shared of any criticality, and it was like uncritically celebrating 1857 in many aspects, with the exceptions like Badri Narayan or Charu Gupta, who talked about the different ways in which the Dalits were now visualizing 1857 and trying to assert their role, and Shashank Sinha's article on the Adivasis, which was also very interesting. So there were certain articles where they tried to complicate this aspect of celebrating 1857 and how underprivileged communities who were now asserting themselves tried to now assert for themselves a bigger role. So it's not that it was completely uncritical, but it was largely uncritical. It was due to the fact that 1857 had acquired a cult status among us by 1857, and now every course of the Hackneyed question was 1857 a war of independence. So that reflects in many ways the cult status which 1857 played, that it was a war of independence. It was an epic moment. Having said all that, before I conclude, one thing must be said, that, and this might not be in consonance with the theme of my event, that ultimately 1857 was firstly a instance where Hindus and Muslims fought together, and in these troubled times that is very significant. And also whether it was a war of independence or not, whether modern notions of modern nationalism can be applied to it, whether standards of modern nationalism it can be called a war of independence or not, we don't know. But one can say that these people fought for us, the people of the subcontinent. That can be said. It might not be a very academic statement, but I'll still make it. And also remember that these people, everybody has their faults and faults. These people have their shortcomings, but they are fantastically brave people. These people, and they sacrificed a lot. Many of them lost their families, their fortunes. Overnight, they became from reasonably affluent families to destitute families. And many of the Nawabs you see around these days were surely collaborators in 1857, while often it is said that the actual Nawabs who fought in 1857 now drive rickshaws. That might be too dramatic a statement, but lot of them lost everything, were ruined overnight, and this we must remember. So thank you for giving me an opportunity. It's good to be back, at least online in the Northeast. I have grown up in Shillong between the age of 15 and 22. So thank you. And before that I was in Assam. I have grown up in the Northeast completely, and I can speak Assamese like almost like a native. I can't speak Khasi, and that's it. So thank you very much for giving this opportunity. Thank you.
So thank you, sir, for this wonderful lecture. And some of the aspects where I am completely unaware about some of the aspects that you have told right now. And these are really interesting, especially about the perspective of the Dalits, and also the recent studies about on 1857. And these are really interesting. So the audience, if you have any queries, so please write down in the comment box, and we will present it to Professor Dasgupta. Can I move to the question and answer session?
Yeah. No issues.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Okay. So, okay, sir. Okay, sir. Before the audience write the questions, I have a query regarding 1857. It's not on the aspect of remembering 1857, but regarding like after the 1857, a huge change in the structure of the army happened, as the British invented something very unscientific thing like the martial race, and they appointed the armies on the basis of martial race, where the Gurkhas and the Rajputs, and they were given better priorities because they are more martial than the other races in India. So, what change happened in case of South? Because as a repercussion of 1806 Vellore Mutiny.
Yeah. So, okay. First of all, South was loyal in 1857, the Madras Army. So not much happened with the Madras armies to begin with. As you all know, that there were three colonial armies as for during the time of the East India Company: Bengal Army, Madras Army, and the Bombay Army, corresponding to the Bengal Presidency, Bombay Presidency, and the Madras Presidency, with the Bengal Army being the largest of the three. The Bengal Army, which was consisting mostly of higher caste and middle peasant soldiers from today's Eastern UP and Bihar, who were called Purvayas, and which had a very high caste atmosphere, with lot of high caste sentiments being officially recognized. It all disintegrated completely in 1857, and they disbanded mostly the army. And now already from the 1830s and 40s, they were taking the Gorkhas and the Sikhs. They started taking more and more Gorkhas and the Sikhs in the Bengal army, and the Gorkhas and the Sikhs. What they did was, actually, you are talking about the martial race theory. Initially, what they did to prevent any rebellion again, they started what was Saxena, I think is A.L. Saxena, called the balanced recruitment theory. Like every area, be it South India, be it Bombay Presidency, be it Bengal Presidency particularly, they took care to balance the army in every aspect. Among regiments, if there are 10 companies, 4 Sikhs, 4 Dogras, 2 Gorkhas, okay. Among regionally, if even if there are these single class regiments like the Gorkhas, let's say, who are trustworthy, but even if they are taking no chance, if there are single class regiments like the Gorkhas and the Dogras, there will be if there are 3 Gorkha regiments, there will be 2-3 Dogra regiment too. Means in every aspect balance it. Regiment inside the regiment, region wise, balance the army, so that no community or no area, no region has a dominance. From the 1870s, the martial race theory came in, because they believe that Russia is coming from Central Asia, advancing through Afghanistan. So we need the best army. So by that time, the martial race theory came, where this Field Marshal Roberts, McMahon, and all, they held that certain races, certain communities, are better suited for fighting. The Gurkhas, the Dogras, the Punjabi Musalmans, the Sikhs, the Rajputs, whereas certain communities are not meant for fighting, especially the Bengalis. And the southern communities, the Madras army, since you asked, they also suffered a setback, because one of the indices of the martial race theory was that if you have not fought for long, if there has been peace in your area for long, then you become unwarlike. Your fighting capabilities deteriorate. So South paid the price for peace after 1806, because there was no major battle for long. So Field Marshal Roberts held that because they had not fought for long, they were now becoming unmartial. Apart from exceptions like the Kurds, most of the southern, now they were saying the south, there was less attention being paid to the south. More and more recruitment was taking place from the Gurkhas, the Dogras, the Rajputs, or the Sikhs. So that is my answer to your question.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. So I can see there is a question in the comment box, and this is a. So do you think that in the peripheral regions like northeastern corner of the nation, the local disturbances could go beyond Sepoy mutiny or the fight of the local feudal landlords and become a mass movement? If it didn't, why?
Well, though I studied in northeastern India, I cannot. I could stick to 1850. Let's say it's very difficult, because let's take the 1824 Burma War. Okay, so what happened was that the Ahom kingdom was unable to defend itself. Okay, so the British came in, and among the sections of the British, among the sections of the Assamese nobles, some thought that the English were the better option at the moment, because we have to defend ourselves in the Burmese. Whereas some thought that no, we will not tolerate any kind of servitude, be it the Burmese or be it the English. And people like Pioli Fukan led the revolt. But it is said that on the other hand, collaborators like Moniram Diwan sided with the English in putting down the revolt. So that is, but this is one aspect of Moniram Diwan which is not highlighted now. I mean, if I was saying it in Assam, I would be careful myself to say that he played a role in the execution of Assamese nobles who fought against the British in 1824. So, and as far as 1857 is concerned, why it didn't happen is a difficult question, because see, as far as 1857 is concerned, it is part of a larger movement. Okay, it is part of a larger movement, and whatever plans Moniram Diwan might have made in 1857, before they could be executed, they were detected. So maybe if they had been more careful, if they had been smarter, or maybe a matter of chance, Assamese Daroga intercepted the letters, it's a matter of chance. If this had not happened, then maybe the rebellion would have been stronger in Assam. But the point is that before it could take roots, it was nipped in the bud. So that was one instance. And other instances, one thing one must remember, that 1857, why the other rebellions did not take a mass uprising or something. 1857, for all its limitations, and it had its geographical limitations, was still a big movement, which enveloped large areas of the subcontinent. That is what gave it its strength, because it was a mass movement in large areas of the northeast. When you're fighting northeast, subcontinent, when you're fighting against the British, you're fighting in an isolated corner in the northeast, or let's say Maharashtra, anywhere, and it's not that big a movement. You are bound to be crushed, because you must remember that it is however popular your rebellion. You must remember that the British were the superpower of the day. They were at their wits' end. For a time, it looked like they would lose, because 1857 acquired this. It went beyond regions. And it enveloped large parts of the subcontinent. That is what gave the revolt its momentum, and that is what made it very hard for the British. So let's say if isolated rebellions or regional rebellions, be it the Southern rebellion, are ultimately doomed to fail, because how could they take on the British without coordination from other areas of the subcontinent? So that is what my reply would be. So it's not lack of bravery or lack of popular participation. It's just sheer magnitude of the forces against you. Where unless you coordinate with other regions, you cannot take on a powerful entity like the East India Company or the British Empire. Any more questions? I have no problems, but if people don't have questions, that's okay.
Okay, sir. I am checking the comment box. Okay, so another question from Shashwata Bhattacharya. So the question is,
Who I think is my former student anyway. What is he saying?
okay, sir. So why the tribal people of northeastern region couldn't assert their identities like Dalits by connecting themselves to 1857, as argued by Professor Badrinarayan?
Why the tribal people of Northeast?
They couldn't assert their identities like Dalits by connecting themselves to 1857, as argued by Professor Badrinarayan.
Wait. He is saying that why the tribal people of Northeast could not assert their identities by
like Dalits connecting themselves to 1857.
See, first of all, one thing must be remembered that no community in this entire 200 years was a perennial rebel or a perennial collaborator. The rebel of 1806 was a loyalist in 1857. The Purbaya rebel of 1857 was a loyalist in 1806. Or the Sikhs or the Bengalis, loyalist Bengalis of 1857 were at the forefront of the national movement in the early 20th century. So who rebels when is contextual. Okay, who rebels when is contextual. So it depends on a lot of factors. So just because the Dalits participated in 1857 in major ways does not necessarily mean that the tribals will have to participate in 1857. Tribals have a long history, the northeastern tribals have a long history of resistance. Be it the Tirot Singhs, I think it's anniversary today, right? If I'm not mistaken, you Tirot Singhs. So there are a lot of Rani Goidanelu, the Kuki rebellion. So there is a long history of tribal resistance in the British. But it's not necessarily that it has to happen in 1857 only. It depends on a lot of context. So the context has to be there. So for the tribals, maybe the context was not there in 1857. So, but again, in other times, now I can put it other ways that if a tribal uprising happens in the northeast in let's say 20 years later, whatever I said, why the Dalits of northern India did not coordinate with the uprising. Why is it that only the tribals have to coordinate with the Dalits? One can say that at least if a tribal uprising has happened 30 years later, why can't the so-called mainstream Dalits from the mainstream India connect with them? So I can put the question the other way also. Why, let's say, when the Kukis are rebelling, why are the Dalits not supporting them? So there is also this case of geographical distance. There is a lot of things. Whether a movement remains localized or whether it spreads. There is a lot of this. There are a lot of factors. So that would be my answer.
Okay, sir.
Shashwata, I hope that satisfies you. Okay. Okay, are you there?
Yes, sir. I'm checking the comment box. Yes, sir. He has replied.
There are no other questions?
Yeah, I no, sir. Correct. No, sir. No more questions, maybe. So,
Okay. So thank you.
Shall we
Anybody
wait?
free to questions? I won't eat them up. It's okay. Shashwata I know for long. He has been our student in Visva-Bharati. So in a sense, he's still my student because once you have taught somebody, he remains your student. She remains a student all your life. Of course, they can become my colleagues also tomorrow. That's there. Then, anyway,
Yes, sir.
Okay. So in case there are no other questions, one of my students is doing a PhD from your center, Imanul Hassan. Do you know him?
Yes, sir. He is also part of part of the team, and he is currently also present in the meeting as well.
Acha, 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 acha. Okay. Okay, so if there are no more questions, then I can take my leave. You just check the comment box once more.
Yes, sir, yes, sir. I'm checking.
I'm here, sir.
Does he have a question? I heard somebody say something. I'm not sure. What's his
Sir,
name?
I'm Imon. I have just responded, sir.
Okay, okay, okay. ठीक है. So ठीक है, then let me thank you, Imon. Then let me disconnect. Okay, thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, sir.
And I'm very happy that you people have taken this initiative, and you are doing well. People like Aisha Jalal, I think Harbans Mukhi have spoken. You're doing very well.
Yes, sir.
Keep on doing it. I have myself was the convener of the history session in JNU, and I know how difficult and how thankless these talks are often. So I know all this. So I really appreciate what you're doing. But don't think yourself as the periphery. Northeast is a lot of things to give to the nation. Who decides who is periphery, who is core? Okay. So I'm just a suggestion. Just a friendly suggestion. So that's it. And thank you. And we'll meet again. So thank
Yes,
you. I'm
sir.
disconnecting. Okay.
Yes, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay. Thank you.